So, welcome to the Business of Writing and Romance, and we're your hosts. I'm Rachael Heron.
I'm Carolyn Jewell.
And we are two feminists who write romance and know a hell of a lot about the publishing industry, and we want to share that with you. One thing we want to say is that we may swear from time to time because we are grown women and we are writers and we like to use all of the good words. So, without further ado, Carolyn, who are you?
God, starting right off with the hard question.
Well, not your whole history, but give me your bio. I mean, like your bio line.
Okay. Carolyn Jewell. I write historical romance and paranormal romance and some very edgy erotic stories. And I have been writing since 1987. I have written for publishers like St. Martin's Press, HarperCollins, Penguin Putnam, Hachette Book Group. I am, however, now completely self-publishing since I have reverted backlist and new front list.
Yay.
So I think I'm up to 37 novels, novellas, and short stories.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's why I'm excited to be doing this podcast with her. I'm Rachael Heron, and I am the author of 13 romances. I wrote it down. No, 12 romances, 3 mainstream novels, 1 memoir. I am both traditionally and self-published, so you would call me hybrid right now. And we have a lot we want to share with you over this new podcast. And what we're going to be doing today is actually kind of talking about our podcast and what we're going to be doing with it. And then we're going to ask for your feedback too, what you want to hear in the future. So, shall we jump right in?
Go for
Let's
it.
do it.
Let's do it.
Okay, well, I would love to ask you about your history of writing. Just walk me through Carolyn Jewell becomes an author.
Before I do that,
Yes.
I should say that I am currently a member of the RWA National Board of Directors. So, disclaimer, anything that I say here is my own words, my own opinions, and are not the words or opinions of RWA.
Which is Romance of Writers of America if you are brand new to romance writing. Great.
So,
That lets you totally off the hook. Now let's dish.
all right.
Okay, so what's your history? How did you come to writing?
I just always wanted to be a writer. Can't remember a time when I didn't. I think lots of people who end up as writers felt that way. Nothing new there. And finally, like I was a poli-sci major in undergraduate school. Oh my God. And I didn't take any English, which came back in a weird way. Later, I didn't have to take any English as an undergraduate because I tested out of all of it. So I had no English courses on my undergraduate record, which mattered later when I was trying to get into graduate school.
Yeah.
So then about, I was like 27, I think, when I finally thought, if you really want to write at some point, you actually have to write it. And so I started writing, and I'm kind of that story that you never hear about, which is I go, I'm going to write a romance novel because I love reading historical romance. And so I did. Just like a year later, all I'm doing is like changing punctuation, and I go, I guess I'm probably done. So, I thought, okay, I can only take 2 rejections at once. So I prepared 2 query letters, and I sent them out, but I'm also dyslexic, and I misaddressed one of them because I reversed the numbers in the street address.
God.
It came back 6 months later, undeliverable. But 2 weeks, literally 2 weeks after I sent out my apparently 1 query letter, I come home and there's a message on my answering machine that says, hey, can you give us a call back? We think we have an offer on your book. And I'm going, oh my God. This is before they had
Wow.
voicemail or email or
Right.
anything. It's like, oh my God. So I'd went and walked around, and I had to wait,
Jumped up and down and screamed.
So apparently somebody didn't turn in their book on time. And my book came across their desk, and literally they said, as we're talking on the phone, they go, well, you don't sound like you're crazy. And I go, I'm not. I don't think so.
Oh my goodness.
And so then I wrote a book for St. Martin's Press, and that kind of started everything. And I was a pantser, seat of the pants writer, before anybody ever knew that. And I wrote my second book the same way. And my editor at St. Martin's Press had moved to HarperCollins and took me with her. So I wrote for HarperCollins after that. And then I read a bunch of writing books. And I found out I was apparently doing it wrong. And so I wasn't unable to publish another novel for like 7 years because doing it wrong. So then I said after this, I don't care what the books say about how to plot your novels, as I'm looking at my 70-page outline. And I went back and I pantsed the entire, I just said, fuck it. I'm starting over. I'm doing it the way I did the first two. 6 weeks later, I was done with that, and I sent it out to a bunch of people. I took all their comments, put it in together, and 6 weeks later, that book was published.
Oh my goodness.
So I kind of get a little ragey when people talk about plotting being
that
the correct way. No. Some people need to. Other people are like me, don't need to. So.
Amen.
And so once it was like, okay, I know how I write. I'm going to do that from now on, and then careers go up and down, and there you go. So I've been writing ever since.
And what year was that?
First book was published in 1987. Second book was published shortly after that, like 1990 or something like that.
I was working in a bookstore in 1990. I may have sold your book. I probably did, in fact.
And you know what? When I published my first book, I was living in Berkeley. I published my first book. I have my first cover, and it's like this Pinot cover, and it's so beautiful. And I take it in to get it framed. And the lady looks at me and goes, I just went to a conference, and we talked about how to keep people from reading books like this.
What? What kind of... She was going to the anti-fun conference?
And I'm going, do you not get that I'm having this book framed that has my name on it?
I might be excited about it. You rude piece of... Wow.
That's the attitude that people still have about romance.
Which is why we like to talk about our feminism and our feminist romance, and that only means that we just think the gender should be equal. Have you heard what Caitlin Moran says about feminism?
No.
She says that if you have a vagina and you would like to control it, you're a feminist. Also, if you love someone who has a vagina and you would like her to control it, you're a feminist. Welcome. So...
I guess I'm a feminist.
I guess so. I guess we both are. Well, I also, like you, always wanted to write. Since I learned that there was somebody behind the books, I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I knew how to write and I knew how to read, and so one day it just clicked. Those two things go together. And I also, like you, went to school for something completely different. I started out doing business, and basically almost academic probation myself out of college like 3 or 4 times until I finally realized that, maybe I should do the one thing that I want to do, which is English. So I changed to English, and then I got my undergrad. That only took me 7 years. But then I went straight into grad school, got my Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing at Mills College in Oakland. And then for the next 7 years, I didn't write a damn word because the critique process had killed me.
7 years, during... The MFA or the 7 years after the MFA? Combined?
So it was 7 years undergrad, because I took the long route, 2 years grad school, and then 7 years of not writing.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I learned a lot in the MFA program, but I am also one of those people who says you absolutely do not need one. I don't think I routinely use anything I learned in my grad program, except for... I'm really good at dialogue because of a particular class I took with a particular teacher, and I remember feeling myself grow. But I was so scared of writing after that program that I just didn't. I just kept trying to write the great American novel, and I'd get 400 pages in or 100 pages in or 200 more pages, and then I would go under the bed because my process is writing really fast, which I know now, and then fixing later. But for some reason, for a lot of years, I thought that I had to sit down and write good prose. I didn't know that I could write utter crap and then fix it later. The grad school program didn't teach me that. So, like you, I was
just thinking about my grad school experience. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But I really wanted to write, and I was working 911 fire medical, and I remember I was in Barnes and Noble one day, and my wife had just walked in, and I said, you know what? want to write a romance. And, and we have this baggage about the word romance, and I was hoping that she wouldn't say, oh, really, a romance? And instead she goes, that's hot. You should do that. So I proceeded to write a terrible romance, which I actually didn't finish, but I got closer to writing romance, and then I found National Novel Writing Month in 2006. I wrote a super fast draft of a romance about a knitter and a cowboy, a sheep rancher, and I like to say that they both need wool, but not to generate heat because they generate enough of their own. And through NaNoWriMo, I learned that my process is to go really fast and really bad. And that book became my first book that I got an agent. I did not have your luck with sending out queries. I sent my agent, who was my dream agent and my friend, and she's a genius and she's wonderful. But she was my 32nd query.
I had other experiences where it took me much longer to say find. My first agent passed away, and so it took me much longer to find another agent, and that was like not the right agent for me. And so
So you had a total of 3 then. More?
1, 2, 3. I'm on my 4th agent now, but I've been with Kristen she's fantastic.
She's with Kristen Nelson.
Fantastic.
Kristen Nelson is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I'm with Susanna Einstein, and I love Susanna Einstein. But yeah, so then she took that book out, and it was one of those, fairy tale come true that it went in a 3-book deal to HarperCollins at auction with a ton of excitement. And then, the book sold okay, and then the second book came out the week the borders closed. Oh. So that effectively destroyed.
That killed so many
It did kill
books.
so many people. It killed so many romance writers.
Yeah.
Romance writers, especially, I'm sure that it was across the board in terms of writing, but romance writers, because Borders was so strong in their romance section, and it was that very week. So I did not ever earn out that contract, and so now I've had to go all sorts of different directions, which we'll be talking a lot about. But that's how I got to where I am today.
Yeah. So my grad school experience was a little different from you. I went back much later after I'd been, I was already, multi-published, but I kept thinking I want to do this grad school thing. But of course I ended up having to enroll in a second BA program because I didn't have any undergraduate English, and I kept looking at graduate schools and going, how do you get into graduate English program with no undergraduate English?
Wow.
And of course I killed it on the GREs.
I bet.
Because all I did was spend my time learning algebra so I wouldn't totally fail the math section. And I did really well on both those. But then it turned out not to matter because I went into that second BO program, thought I'm going to get my BA in English, and then it just turned out the professor for my first class was the dean of the graduate admissions. I had my son was 5 then, so I was only looking at programs that were close to home and that would work with being a single parent. Mm-hmm. So she and I talked about halfway through the semester, and she was kind of like, what are you doing in this class? And so the next year I went into the MA program, and they were fantastic. Sonoma State was the most amazing experience. Okay. Oh my God, the teachers had no problem with genre romance. They had it was just fantastic. And
I would never have said the word romance in my program ever.
I went in I went in as this kind of cranky, okay, I know what people think about romance. I don't really give a shit.
So we're allowed to swear.
Yeah. And so, but they were totally supportive of it. And I was actually going to go, I'm not going to do the creative writing. I don't need the creative writing thing because I'm already doing that. And I was going to do the emphasis in literature. But then, and that was going out great. But also because I didn't have any undergraduate English, part of the agreement for me was I was supposed to take this undergraduate stuff, which I started leaving till the end because it was not
right.
So eventually they waived that for me.
Good.
Because I was also on the very slow track for my MA program because I was working full time and I was a single parent, and I was also I had contracts to fulfill. So it was one semester I took 2 units of TA because I had a book to write really fast, and there's no way. So I wasn't in the MA. I think they just wanted me out. We know you can do this. And the great thing about going back to grad school later in life is I already read if you're a writer, you're almost always a reader. So I
Yes.
had already read like at least half the required
Yeah.
reading list, and so
I honestly don't think you should be a writer if you're not a reader. I think that
Yeah.
should ixnay you right out.
I think some people though just have a knack. Like one of the best writers I ever saw when I was working at the writing center was English was his second language, and he was just this amazing writer. And I'm looking through his paper because like most people who come into the writing center are saying, "Oh, my paper's due in 2 hours. Can you help me?" And I was like, "Oh,
I worked at the writing center too.
Yeah,
I remember that.
So you heard a lot of that.
Yes.
And this guy, and I just look at him and go, "Oh my God!" I mean, I realized his major was something like communications or something not really writing related. And I just like, "Oh my God, you should just someday just think about this because you are amazing." And he didn't have that huge reading, but my God, just all this talent was so there with the way.
Interesting.
So I'll never say never about anything, but if you're a writer, it sure helps to be
Yeah.
a reader.
Yeah. And for me, I feel like I need it. The more I write, the more I feel like I run out of words and I need to fill them back in.
Yeah.
The faster I write, the more I feel like I have to read too.
I totally, yeah, because you get stuck in your own words.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've forgotten, like, there's like,
Yeah.
oh, I only use 50 words.
I know.
Where's all the rest?
Okay, so I now would like to talk to you. You're not just a writer. You have an insane amount of knowledge that I'm actually deliberately trying to take advantage of by doing this podcast with you. In the technical field, you have what a lot of us don't possess. Did that come? How did you get into the tech world?
Yeah, so kind of the way a lot of people get into tech, which was I was at a company like at the dawn of it, so this maybe would not be a lot of people. So let's go and talk about the fact that old people and technology, oh my God. So yeah. So anyways, I was working at a law firm, and they had PCs that they had not been doing anything with, and they started breaking, and they're all like, everybody's like going around, "Oh my God, what do we do? It doesn't work." And so I go, "Well, I'll look at it," because nobody else was. And it just turned out that I was really good at fixing them. And so from there, as tech just kind of went very fast from there. And so I became their network administrator. And from there, I went to a biotech firm where I was a systems analyst, working with a really smart database guy. Just so smart. I learned so much from him. And so from them, actually, I went, so while I was at that job, they asked me to take on their intranet. So I built like the
Here, Carolyn,
forensics department.
have the internet.
Yeah, here, we'll teach you HTML. Go for it. And that was also super fun. And so then I got a job like much closer to home, with basically revamping a website from the ground up, because everything was hard-coded and it needed to be, not hard-coded, and it needed to be, it just needed to be brought up into some of the more modern web tools. And so one of the first things that I said we should do was, we need database-driven content behind this. And the database department at that particular job said, well, that's a 2-year project, and that was unacceptable for our particular team. And I said, well, I think, if we do it this other way, we can probably do, have our something, in about 3 months. And so we did, or I should say I did, because they said, okay, do that. And so
you
all
learn
of a
by
sudden,
doing.
Yeah, and so then all of a sudden it was like, okay, so now you're a database administrator. And so really it was just like, okay, here's how you do all this. And then they put me on the database team. And so then I became a SQL Server database administrator. And SQL Server is a Microsoft tool for a relational database system.
Thank you, because I actually had no idea what you were saying.
Okay. And so yeah, and then I became a data architect, because it's not just about like handling databases, but like building the structure of the database, which is a completely also just an art and a science.
Huh.
And so yeah, then I worked in I was the lead database administrator on a team of at a different company, leading a team of like 6 to 8 depending on workloads.
What's fascinating to me is that like you got into publishing in a time where none of that would have had anything to do with writing.
Never.
And now
Never.
you have this these tech underpinnings for running a self-publishing company, and you actually know what's going on under the hood.
Yeah, it's just, I never expected
expect
that to happen.
happen.
It's just like crossing the stream. Just
Yeah.
like, because if you have familiarity with websites and web coding, that's, I mean, an ebook is under the hood essentially its own little world of
code.
Proprietary HTML, which you do have to learn, and
which is so easy to break. If anyone listening has done their own self-publishing, you know that just one sideways glance can knock it to the ground.
Yeah, if you don't terminate that with a semicolon, you're dead. And I've had arguments with people who like, oh, you don't have to know. That's true. You know, HTML specification says you can get away with not terminating, certain CSS without, semicolons. But in fact, they do have to be there because there are edge cases where it does break. So if you're saying that you don't have to, it's because you weren't very good at your job. Because you never found those edge cases. So I'm.
Yeah, but you'll hear in my voice that I'm following you because I am pretty damn technically oriented, but I did not know the rule about the semicolon until right now. But
always close your tags.
Always close your tags. I did know that. Just like a dialogue tag, right? You write. You work with SQL and you work with sequels. Can we segue into?
Oh, well done. Well done.
Thank you. So I know that you have said in the past that you're a classic poster child for something. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. And that is, if you've been in the romance community for a while where self-publishing really took hold because romance readers are on the bleeding edge of ebook technology, then you know that series sells. Series makes a big difference in how fast your career goes if you handle your series correctly. Now, I have been writing for so long, and I came into the self-publishing was like 2011 when I started getting my reversions. And that's right kind of when things were taking off. And I already had like maybe 15 or 20 books that had been with traditional publishers. And I had 2 series, actually 3 series, a paranormal series, a historical romance series, and then one other series book that was in a contractually very unhappy place. We should talk about that someday, about contract terms and why I had to wait 10 years before I could even do getting that reversion was such a big deal because it's like one of my marquee books. So anyway, I have these series that were like locked in with the beginning books with traditional publishers, and self-publishing, we know the things that you need to do to make a series take off, which is write more books, put the first book free, give it away, do whatever you can to get people into that first book to pull through your sales through the rest of the series. And I cannot do that with the books, many of the books that I have. Once I started getting reversions and was trying to negotiate, like, well, do I accept new publishing contracts? And I was like, yeah, I don't think so. Because I was looking at the numbers that were coming in at that point going, oh, okay. No. Now that I have these books back, and there's some that I just am not going to get reversions for.
Me too.
And I'm hoping, but I don't know. So there's things that you can do with your career if you don't want to like. What's the way to put this? Okay, I don't want to screw over my readers, because when they invest in a series, when they go, okay, here's the first 4 books and they love it, and your series premise promises them 7 books, and who wants? I just don't feel that you should go. It's that big fuck you to the reader to say, sorry, series gone, you never find out what happens.
Right, there are 7 brothers, but you only heard about 4 of them.
Yeah.
And you know the other 3's names,
so
and you were super excited about Rupert, but you're never going to meet Rupert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I understand. I mean, you just have to make a career decision as to whether you're just going to say, I'm really sorry, bummer.
Yep.
Or, so my own decision was that I wanted to fulfill the promise to the readers, so I did finish out, my paranormal series. I've gotten up to the promised 7 books, and now, okay, you've got
that was really good of you. I honestly don't know if I would have done that. I might have said,
I paid a financial price for it.
Yeah, I bet you did.
But on the other hand, so that it is what it is, and so part of my thing is like, when I'm moved on to some other world or whatever, do I want to be happy or unhappy about the state of my writing career? And I actually personally just feel that I feel better as a writer and a person to say, you know what, I finished out those and I wanted to find out what happened in that story. Because I'm a pantser. I didn't know until I write the book. So there's things that you can do and decisions that you can make, and you should go into it eyes wide open as to whether you're going to, how you're going to manage a series that maybe when you can't and don't control all of the books in it. And so now that I have some books back and I can see like those funnels building, it makes such a huge difference.
It does, doesn't it?
But the money's still good.
Yes. We're gonna talk a lot about that. The money is pretty darn good, and we can't wait to share that with you. I would like to ask you one question. What do you wish you'd done that you didn't? I've already kind of answered that. But.
Yeah. Well, I am good friends with some really fantastic self-publishers who were kind of there from the beginning. And they were very kind enough, to give me some good advice. And some of the things they said to me were like, don't even accept another contract. And at that point, I had accepted one more contract, and against that advice. And so if I had taken that advice, I would have cut loose from that. I would have only had 2 books locked up in that Paranormal series instead of 4. I've gotten 1 reversion since. And having only 2 books locked up would have put me in a very different position in how to build through the rest of those. I could have gone it would have been different. So I would have turned down traditional contracts sooner. I probably would have written the books in a different order. I would have gone, rather than going and concentrating on the Paranormal series, probably what I should have done was gone to the historical romance one, because that was the one that I knew from hearing from readers every year for 10 years. Where's the next book? Where's the book about?
Right.
So, yeah. So I wish I'd done that. So, Rachel, I have some questions for you.
Okay.
So I'm just kind of going in random order.
Okay.
So we've talked about your MFA, but let's talk about diversity in writing and some of the choices about the writing that you've done with, for example, straight characters versus non-straight characters and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's something that's important to me. And you heard me mention my wife earlier, and I, as far as I can tell, and I put out the call far and wide to people, and if you guys know of anything, let me know. But I feel like I'm the only gay, married, queer woman who has written a heck of a lot of straight romance. And the reason I wrote a lot of straight romance is actually, there's a couple reasons. Number one, I'm bisexual, and I think that men are super hot. And I love to write about women falling in love with men. That's not me leaving any ideal behind, because I love that. I feel like I have the perfect life, and that I have an amazing, sexy wife, and I get to fall in love with the most amazing, sexy men all the time, and I don't have to live with any of them, and they never leave the toilet seat up. So I am happy, but there is a large part of me that does, feel wonder if I'm betraying my community at the same time, and I'm always kind of wrestling with that. But I was really never able to sell any kind of queer novel to New York, not yet. I've snuck queer characters into a lot of my books. I haven't even sneaked them in. I've done it with permission, and I had a lesbian couple who were the mothers of one of my main characters in one of my mainstream books, but that's a mainstream book. So in self-publishing, I'm super excited. I'm super excited by a lot of things, but including the fact that we get to include diverse voices, and not just from the writers, but from the characters within the books. So that's something that's really important to me, and I have seeded the town that I'm writing in right now with the first full-length lesbian romance that I'm going to write about Dixie the bartender. Yes, in Darling Bay, and I can't wait to write her. And I love getting emails from people who are saying, I can't wait for you to write her, and I don't have to. You and I have talked about this at length. I am at this point, I would like to continue traditionally publishing mainstream novels, and self-publishing romance, and I want to keep that up. But at this point, I don't have to make a decision that feels like any kind of betrayal to me, because if I want to write that book, I get to write that book.
Well, we certainly know that traditional publishers have not been very good at figuring out what will actually sell.
Right.
So not necessarily that somehow an author, I'm going to take that back and say I actually do think authors have a better idea of what will sell. Because I know so many authors that I've heard say, God, I really want to write this book, and they know nobody will write it because it's, quote, the book of their heart, or it's a one-off, or it's, vampires before anybody wanted vampires, or it's vampires after nobody wanted,
It was male before anybody wanted male.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I had a book in which like in 2005 or so, where I actually had an anal sex scene, and my editor said, I don't think anybody wants to read that.
Oh, people want to read that, girl.
Oh, they did. But it was not in the book that was ultimately published, because back then that was. But see, that's an example of an author who's like the zeitgeist you have as a hooked in like author and reader in the genre that I knew it. It's how the brain works. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wish that editors must see that come across their desk all the time. Why is everybody writing about anal sex? Well, because maybe they're telling you that you should like have that in there as an example.
Right.
So I think the same is true of like the diverse romance, and there is so much information that is going to be coming out about some of the discrimination problems we have, and the racial problems that we have as a society, and how they've trickled down, and not even just trickled down, but sort of like, I don't know, beat down on the diverse voices, and they sell a lot.
Well, I was talking recently for a class of mine to Eloisa James, and she said that she believes, and I really like this theory, that romance is always on the cutting edge of what is happening everywhere else. We are the voice of the change, and when we are demanding diversity, it's because we're almost pushing that into the world around us. What do you think about that?
Well, here's what I think. White girl. So maybe I'm not the person to answer that question.
Yeah.
I know there's a problem. I know that my career has been easier.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm not an author of color. I think there are so many amazing authors of color who are finally having their voices heard, because they don't have to get shut out by traditional publishers. They still get shut out by traditional publishers. We know that. But now there's a place in romance where they can actually reach the audience. And
who wants to read them? The audience
who wants to read them? They want that. And I want those voices to come in, because all those voices make every story so rich.
I really respect and very much honor and like that you say, and that you're not the person perhaps to answer that, and I know that I am not the person to answer that. And let's have some people who can answer these questions talk to us.
I just want them to come and talk about their stories.
Well, actually, about stories and publishing and the business of writing.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you this. What do you wish you'd done with your writing career that you didn't do?
I wish that I had not waited so long to finish my first book, to write the words, the end, to figure out how to do that. And it's a real specific regret for me, because my mom was the biggest reader, the biggest champion of reading, the biggest champion of my writing, but she never read a book by me. I sold my first book a month and a half after she died. And I tried to even read her some of the book while she was on her deathbed, but she couldn't. I couldn't. It wasn't the place or time. But she would have really liked my books, and if I had done that if I'd been brave enough to ignore all the criticizing voices in my head a few years earlier, I would have really liked that.
So I have a follow-up question to that, which is, sometimes those decisions to forge ahead are born out of maturity.
Yeah.
And it's you feel that because you went through those years where you didn't have that.
Yeah.
So I guess part of my question is, how much of that is because you weren't ready to do it yet? Or do you think that there was a set of circumstances under which you actually would have, and you maybe made a conscious decision not to?
I think it's a combination of both. I think I didn't have the maturity. I also I guess a bigger regret is that I didn't surround myself with other writers. I left the MFA program and I wrote all by myself. And when I came to my first Romance Writers of America meeting, I already had a contract in hand. I had never met another romance writer. And, I started writing romance, as did you, before there was all this information online. There were Harlequin guidelines, submission guidelines on their very primal website that I looked at. But if I had had a community of writers around me, perhaps I would have gained the courage. And I do always say that my first 2 years in RWA, I learned more than I did in my grant program. But
Not surprised, but
yeah, I know, and I'm still learning. We just actually got out of a meeting this morning, and I learned a ton. I always learn a ton. So if you're a romance writer, go to your local RWA, join online, go to the national convention if you can. We definitely push that. But yeah, I do agree that maturity-wise, I remember in undergrad, a college professor told me, and he's still a friend of mine, I love this guy, and he just looks at me and goes, Rachael, you're such a good writer, and you have no life experience to base anything on. He said so, and I remember he actually said, you're such a good writer, and I don't know if you'll ever succeed. and I love him, and he said that truthfully. He wanted me to go out and get life experience to write about, and not just coast on my talent, which is what I had done all the way through school.
Okay.
I'd always coasted on being a good writer, without having the life underneath it to prop it up.
So, how much of that interaction that you had with that professor was sort of gendered advice? I mean, I have to. I don't know. Had you talked to him at all about the fact that you might want to write romance, or was that even a factor at that?
No, I definitely never said that in my undergrad or my graduate program. Even though I was reading romance the whole time, I always had, since I was 12 years old, and my best friend's mom had the subscriptions and would give me grocery bags full. And I remember that I could, if I pulled a sick day and, said that my period was too bad, I could read 8 books that day in bed. Because I could read for 8 hours, and it took me a little bit more than an hour to read a book. And that's what I would do from the ages of 12 to 25, And that was heaven to me. That was absolute heaven. But,
so you were also one of those kids who was under the bed, covered
always
with the flashlight in the book. Yeah, me too.
Always. That's how I learned about sex. We weren't even allowed to watch TV growing up. I had really hippie parents, and we didn't have a TV for most of my life, and I just learned everything from books. And but I always knew that gendering thing that our society holds up, that the white male, as a rule, is the one who writes these kind of books, and women who like pink are the ones who write these kind of books, and those two people don't hang out.
I read this book once that was this series of short little things about how the great authors of the day became authors, and so many of the choices in the book were male authors, and it became very clear that the reason that these male authors were able to write in the space that they did is that they had a wife who was taking care of everything underneath. She was cleaning the house, she was putting food on the table for this guy. Here, let me feed your art, which is no problem. But the problem is all the women authors had to do all of that stuff for the man in their life, and men in their lives, and the children in their lives, and try to find some place to carve out their writing career. Mm-hmm. But I think what frosted me most was when they gave the brief biography of Toni Morrison and mentioned that she had won the Pulitzer Prize.
We're
not going to mention that Toni Morrison won a Nobel Prize, because they mentioned the Nobels of the male authors.
Of course they did.
And I thought, fuck you, dude.
Yep. And I think I want this, and we're talking about what we want this podcast to be, and I want this not to be Men suck. Their writing, we're not even thinking about, because that's not true. But I think that what you and I agree on, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the white male straight voice right now has enough damn amplification that I don't really feel like amplifying it further.
Yeah, kind of. Pretty much.
And if you are a straight white male writer listening, your input is valuable to us. Maybe? I mean, it is, because you're a person and human, and we respect your human spirit.
Wait. Well, actually.
Well, I think you forgot the hand on your head. Well, actually. We did honestly think about naming this podcast. Well, actually. So what we're saying is we're not going to mansplain to you. And I don't find that term derogatory.
Well, there's just so much to be said about, writing romance and why, just talking about why it's not been given respect or notice. And it's been very great for so much of the romance world to be insulated from some of that, because the male voices by and large there was not a lot of actually in the romance community. And
there's more now.
And there's more now because all these other people have been looking at, wait a minute, romance authors making millions, how could that be?
Romance selling more than any other genre. How do I get in on that action?
Exactly.
I'm going to read 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you how to write one.
Because all romance novels are written in first person. Somebody read
Really?
Yeah, somebody said. That's on a podcast you're not listening to anymore.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, 7 is not a deep dive into romance.
We would like a deeper dive. We would like to go a deeper dive on this podcast together with our guests, with our listeners. We're going to really actively recruit you to come and tell us what you want to hear about. Give us your thoughts, what you need to hear about the business of and the actual writing of romance.
So also within the self-publishing part of it, it's what can we do to gather the data that will propel you through your career? Because romance authors in particular, but I think writers in general, their stock in trade is emotion, even if they don't think it is. That's the whole point of a novel, is to engage the emotions. And so we can be very intuitive thinkers, but business decisions need to have numbers behind them. Mm-hmm. So if you're not gathering data and you're not looking at that data, it's going to be very hard to figure out the next best step to take, because your gut might be incorrect.
Mm-hmm. I am willing to be very transparent with my numbers, because I feel like and you can make your own decision on that, but I feel like there's not as much talk about it as we would like. There's a bunch of people saying, well, I make $1 million a year. And there's a bunch of people saying, who aren't saying, I sold 4 copies of the book that I love. What am I doing wrong? So.
Well, I have thoughts about that. I mean, if you're not selling a lot of books, maybe it's because it's your first book and it's not gonna.
Yes.
You're not there. You have to set up this whole infrastructure to propel backlist and front list forward.
Okay, so I think that on the next show, talking about numbers and backing things up, let's talk a little bit more about how self-publishing has directly changed your career and my career.
Okay. We will do that next time.
Excellent. In the meantime, I think that you should follow us on Facebook and come over to our website and leave a comment on this particular podcast. Tell us what you want to see more of, see less of. Give us all your ideas and what you're excited about. Hit us up on Twitter. Our email is admin something.
Oh, admin at the Business of Writing in Romance.
Admin at the Business of Writing in Romance, or you can reach me.
.com.
Oh, yes. See, she closed her. What's it called?
No, I just gave you the TLD.
She gave us the TLD, which is
the top level domain.
Oh, okay.
So it's a .com.
And this is why we have her for the tech stuff. Or you can hit me at Rachael at RachelHeron.com, and Rachael is spelled like Michael, AEL, or they could email you.
At Carolyn at carolynjewel.com. I was just thinking, I just really didn't. Never mind the whole dyslexia thing in my brain. Those letters are in a different order.
That's why Google is our friend. If you Google Rachael Herron, you'll find me. If you Google Carolyn Jewel, you will find her. It's super easy.
One L in Jewel.
And we would love to hear from you. So thanks for being along on our inaugural episode, and we'll see you real soon.